3 Bassmaster Opens are in the books, 2 Bassmaster Elite Series as well, and 1 Bassmaster Classic on the way. That and more on episode 168 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like always, Kyle Jessie, hanging out in Birmingham for just the last few days before you got to head to the Bassmaster Classic at Grand Lake. Excited to see everybody in Tulsa, Oklahoma next week. But Kyle, we just got off a stretch where we had 3 Opens, 2 Elites, 3 college events, high school, there's Nation was in there as well. These 6 weeks that we went and kicked off the season have been some of the most packed weeks ever. We get 1 week off, and then we're Bassmaster Classic mode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think you could script the season to be a whole lot better as far as history is concerned, weights are concerned. Things have been on fire, really. I mean, when you look across, the Elite Series, the start of the season there, 2 incredible events, and then, like you said, the Opens, setting history marks on 2 of the 3 Opens. And the third history mark being that, Lake Ouachita was probably the greatest Open of all time, just because it was Lake Ouachita. No statistical evidence at that, but anyways, I'm a
biggest
little
bass of the year.
That's correct
For the Opens right now. So we'll still take that. That's still the mark.
We made it to the final day of the Elite at Fork until that was broken, which was crazy. I would have never assumed that, but you can't really complain when there's a bunch of 10-pounders coming across the scale. It's not like that's anything to bat an eye at. But yeah, no, you're not kidding. It was a whirlwind of a start. But like you said, excited to get the Classic going. Obviously, I think anybody that works in the industry that's not a fisherman knows how much work and effort that goes into the Classic. So some of those things are daunting, but like when you look at the tournament itself, it's like, man, I am so excited for that to get kicked off.
I just have been telling Mike McInnes in our meetings that we've had this week, because when I say we have a week off before the Classic, that means we just have a regular work week where we have to deliver all this video content from the Elite Series and the Opens events to people. We got angler requests, we have sponsor requests, we have all this footage. And then we also are making plans. We're making packages for the Classic shows. We're also scheduling interview times, lining out people's things. I just have been telling Mike McInnes in this whole season of life this week and said, can you just make sure that I get to see like a little bit of fishing, like a little bit on live, because I'm going to be on live doing this, going there, got to go shoot this interview, go to the arena. And I was like, at the end of the day, I'm still a fishing fan. I just want to make sure I know I got to run around, but I want to see some fish catches get happen on live with us. So it's going to be a fantastic week at the Bassmaster Classic. We will shoot, just a heads up, early in the podcast, I'll go ahead and tell y'all, we're going to shoot our Classic podcast previewing the week, and then also getting fantasy picks in order and all of that jazz, really exclusively Classic themed in our next episode. This one is recapping the Bassmaster Open. We're going to get to talk to Scott Martin in just a few minutes about how these Opens have gone, because it has been absolutely incredible. It's kind of on the same, we're trying to get the segue here. We just had someone clinch their Classic berth. Congrats to Kyle Austin. So now it gets us in Classic mode, but it is a big start that we do not want to forget the history that we've had in these Opens, because it is something of a spectacle. And so we'll have Scott on in a few minutes to do that. But Kyle, let's talk about Kyle Austin, man. To set the scene for you, young guy, he's been around the Opens for a little while, lives in the same region down the street from where Patrick Walters is. He's a Santee Cooper kid, so he's been traveling to New York and Virginia and Oklahoma and Texas for these Opens to try to qualify for the Bassmaster Elite Series. He comes up about 20 points short last year and gets 12th place when the top 10 had advanced to the Elite Series. He gets 12th, misses out on that, and on the final day of the season, he only had 4 fish. That haunted him all off season, at least until we announced the Open schedule. And then he's like, I've got one in my backyard. I at least can feel good about that. But the big worry with the home field advantage or disadvantage is Patrick Walters would have won AOY if he just did his job at Santee Cooper last year in his home lake. He didn't, misses out on AOY. Kyle Austin was a little worried to make sure that he ran his game plan correctly. And boy, what a game plan it was. He kept it simple. He knew some local knowledge. He used technology just very little, but when he needed to, he still had the trees, those rotations of trees. It was a great show to watch on Bass Live, and I'm glad we got to have Luke Palmer come in and talk about the lake he won on last year and watch it go down this year in just incredible fashion in early March.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it was a heck of a tournament. If it wasn't for the final day being such a soggy, like rainy, wet day, I don't know that there's really much more you could ask for. I mean, guys were just catching big ones left and right and all the way until the final second. Obviously, like you mentioned Scott Martin coming on, Scott was still catching them like seconds before he had to leave. I mean, it was just a crazy, crazy cool tournament to watch on live. And yeah, I mean, well deserved by Kyle Austin, obviously. As you mentioned, a guy that's come close and shown some major signs of being ready to be an Elite Series angler. And it's one of those things you can't even like quantify. It's like when you get that close, and like you said, you have the misfortune of not catching your limit on the final day of the season. Those kind of things are like hard to shake. I mean, they are. Like, it doesn't matter how fierce of a competitor you are, whatever it may be. Like, that's a hard thing to shake. So for him to come back this year and then obviously, notch his ticket to the Classic and get his first Opens win, I mean, that was a really, really cool thing. And to see the local guy, obviously, we give him a hard time sometimes about catfish guiding and doing the things that he does out there. But like, you want to talk about somebody that knows that body of water, Kyle Austin is certainly one of those guys. But another thing I want to mention too, you had mentioned the schedule for the podcast and everything. Thanks to everybody listening. I mean, this year has got off to a really good start. There's been a lot of interaction, a lot of traction with the podcast this year. And, Ronnie and I have said from the beginning that we just like doing this because Ronnie and I, when we just talk, 90% of the time, it's just talking about bass fishing and talking about pro fishing. So,
We should
for us
record
to
this, man. We should like
yeah,
put this somewhere.
exactly. For us to have the opportunity to do this and it'd be a consistent piece of content for Bassmaster.com, the YouTube, social media, all the places it goes. But just big thanks to everybody listening. I certainly appreciate it. And I think for Ronnie, or I'd speak for Ronnie as well in saying that.
Yeah, so I appreciate all the comments, the fans as well that mentioned, "Hey, we hadn't seen a podcast in a while," and it keeps us going in those weeks where it's busy and we can't find time. We're kind of like, "Hey, how do we do this?" And so we're trying to balance as much as possible. But Kyle, let's think about some of the records or what these events are known for. So before the season started, the overall highest weight in the opens. Um, it had been set for a while. Gerald Swindle, 80 pounds, 13 ounces, 2011 at Lake Toho, the Kissimmee chain. That was the highest 3-day opens weight. Obviously, there were some invitational type things that were 3 days that aren't in this category. Then you had Corey Johnston, 2021 St. Lawrence. That was 78 pounds even. And then last year we had two different tournaments jump into the top five, and that was Ben Milliken 77-14 Toledo Bend, and we had Jody White 71-15 at the St. Lawrence jumped in there as well. So we have been adding in there. You also have Chris Lane 70-11 meshed in between those two I just mentioned, and then Brian Hudgens is the 10th, or I think one, two, yeah, the top 10th place 68-6 at the Harris chain in 09. So before this year, we had, the winner of events. We really hadn't had a close event at the top. Then we have Scott Martin knock out 90 pounds, 6 ounces. He takes the top spot for the highest winning weight for an open ever. And he does so by 21 pounds over second place in the tournament. So they had no shot of being in the top 10 list either. Then we go to Santee Cooper. Obviously, we know Ouachita's overall weight was lower, but we saw something there we haven't seen anywhere else. We saw the biggest bass of the open season so far at 10-14. But then we go to Santee Cooper, and we add 3 weights to the top 10 all-time list and bump out some other anglers. Kyle Austin's 83.7 is the second highest opens weight ever. He gets the victory. Laker Hal and Scott Martin notch their weights from Santee Cooper in 4th and 5th overall. And they're the only people in the top 10 that were not winners of their tournament. So what a tournament was to have 3 guys within 3 pounds of each other on that final day was absolutely astounding. And so what a great lake to showcase on live, and some of those things falling in real time of like, man, Kyle Austin caught 3 fish early on final day and he's already up at 72, 73 pounds. Like he's going to threaten some records, of some different things. And obviously his spot in second is he's got that by a few pounds.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's been a crazy season as far as weights are concerned, just basically from start to finish. Me and Tommy Sendek here in the office were talking prior to the Open at Santee starting, and I'm not throwing him under the bus by any means, but he suggested that the winning weight was going to be like pretty low, for what I would have guessed. And I told him I thought it would be somewhere between like upper 70s, low 80s, to win. And then it ends up being, just crazy. Like, I mean, it is just a really good event. I mean, we've seen so much from Santee, through the elites that have been there to know that the potential for, big weights are certainly there. It's one of the best big bass fisheries in the country. It's super challenging at times, but obviously with a warming trend and all the things that were heading in the positive direction prior to this Open, you just had to feel like they were going to catch them. But obviously Scott's performance there at Lake Okeechobee just basically shadows this in a way, just because the difference even between those two tournaments was fairly significant. So yeah, I mean, just as far as the Opens are concerned, especially the weights have just been unreal.
Well, Kyle Austin gets it done. And I had actually texted Kyle Wednesday before the tournament started at 10 o'clock Eastern time. So I knew I wasn't going to get a text that night, but he was going to see it the next morning. And I said, winning weight prediction, top 45 weight prediction. And the top 45 is the check range. So the last check's 45th. So he said 30 to 34 pounds will get paid. He gave me a good range there. 15 to 17 pounds will get paid. And then 74 to 78 pounds wins it. Well, 78 pounds would have got you, where would it have got you? 78 pounds would have got you fourth, and 74 pounds would have got you fourth as well, because there was a big gap from third to fourth. But 30 to 34 pounds didn't get you paid. It got you 58th place, was 34 pounds. Bo Browning, 57th, 34.11. Dice K Kita, 34.6. Those were the 57th and 58th place people. Good finish, not a payday though. 45th place was 37 pounds, 4 ounces. So it was 18 and a half pounds a day, 18 pounds, 10 ounces a day to get paid. Crazy higher expectations, but he almost nailed it. Like, to say 17 pounds a day gets paid in an Open, that's lofty. And then so the weight carried through the field pretty good. Kyle Austin, man, really, like we talked about, navigated his game plan perfectly. And in that Open, he said, obviously Moultrie was full, Marion's full. Moultrie's water level is always the volatile thing. They had so much rain Wednesday, the final day of practice, and then they had so much rain coming in on Saturday. I was wondering how they would navigate water flow. They had water open from, it's coming through the river into Marion, or however it gets there, and it's going straight out of Marion. That's a big play, or straight out of Moultrie. And so they had water flowing out. And so the diversion canal is that narrow area between the two lakes. You've been there, running by it, running through it on the water. And I've seen it on Bass Live, and the way it navigates, it's just a small little shipping diversion canal. And at the tail end of that, there's going to be those hot spots, those key areas that we see the good old current fishing on the backside of an island, or a little spot where the water's going to stack up and these fish can hide behind something. And Kyle Austin played that amazingly. He said he ran in there day one, knew that he would have, rarely would someone find that as well or know about that. And so he catches his limit off of it. Then he goes day two, catches his limit off of it. And I think he had, 17, 18 pounds, maybe 20 every day leaving it. And was able to go then skip some trees. He had his rotation of key trees that, yeah, you can use forward-facing sonar and look at the trees and see if fish are there. But Kyle, he was hitting a same tree 6 or 7 times in a day, knowing that it's March. There's going to be a fish on that tree. It's just when that fish is going to pull up on that tree. And so he balanced it very well. Catches a 7-pounder and a 3.5-pounder on the final day on a tree, 2 trees, and was able to. Those were the winning fish. But prior to that, using a lipless crankbait, using a spinnerbait in the current, it was nasty on that final day. You picked a good one to not go to, because taking photos in that, I do not take for granted what Dalton, Grant, and Shane Durant's were doing on the water there, because it was crazy conditions. So Kyle Austin managed that perfectly. His diversion canal spot on that final day, he leaves that area with 4 fish. He catches 6.11, a 5.5, and a almost 5-pounder, and then he has a 2-pounder. So he's not only got to go fill his limit, then he's got to upgrade, and he was able to catch another 2-pounder, fill his limit, And then we said those seven, the 7-pounder and that 3.5 or 4-pounder were the ones that called to get him to the weight needed, because Laker Howell and Scott Martin were pushing him. Let's get to our guest, Scott Martin, and when we hang up with him, we can add some thoughts about Kyle Austin if you want. But let's just go ahead and add Scott in, who has absolutely had an incredible tear these first 2 opens of the year so far. One on his home lake at Okeechobee and one on his father's old home lake of Santee Cooper. So, Scott, can you hear us?
I got you, man.
Hey, thank you for joining us, man. I know it was late. I'm not saying you're an old man, but I'm getting to be an old man. And I was like, I'm going to text McCoy because he's a young, spry guy and say, hey, do you know what Scott's doing tomorrow? And would we even be able to do a podcast with him? And he was like, he's got something in the morning, but he can make time in the afternoon, most likely. So I appreciate you last second notice through a third party, hooking it up to talk to us for a couple minutes.
Yeah, no problem. By the way, McCoy's the old man in the bunch, just so you know. He goes to bed every night at a certain time, and I'm burning the ends.
I know that if he's out in the boat and it gets the perfect amount of sunlight and warmth, he's out. He's going to be asleep in the boat, and we're going to take photos of him asleep on the water. So I figured he gets his naps in, so he may stay up a little later than you, but I'm glad that he was awake as the old man of the bunch to text me back.
Buddy.
Well, Scott, we had just talked about Kyle Austin's impressive win, and we wanted to have you on the podcast not to talk about necessarily your Lake Okeechobee victory, but we will talk about that. But these 6 days of the opens that you have fished this year, 3 at Okeechobee and 3 at Santee Cooper, have you looked at how much weight you've caught? Because I got it written down. The 6 days that Scott Martin has fished in the opens this year, he has weighed in 170 pounds, 8 ounces. That's
crazy.
Incredible because of given the field size and stuff. So tell us about those 6 days of the opens that you've got to experience.
It almost doesn't feel real. Like, and I'm actually nervous that next year is just going to be like a normal year. We'll be at the normal stuff, and like so, we've done it so many days in a row now. It's become the norm, at least in my brain. Like, oh, I expect to catch 20 pounds today. Somewhere, or 25, I should say. But it's just magical, man. It's really, and when I look at it, it's a true blessing, honestly, for me, because Okeechobee and at Santee, like I was shown I found 2 magical places, and same thing at Santee. I found an area that honestly I thought was going to be covered up with boats, and it wasn't somehow. I still don't know how. Like I literally told my partner when we pulled in there that day, I said, dude, my GPS is either broken and I don't know where I'm at and we're lost, or I'm going to catch 25 pounds in the next 5 minutes. And he's like, are you serious? I go, yeah, I can't believe I'm boat 180 and there's no one here. So it was just, I don't know how you prepare for that, but it's been magical. And then if you take the couple elite days, which have not been as good as the open days, but I do have a 24-pound bag at Fork. So 7 out of the 10 days that I've fished competition this year has been 24 pounds or higher.
Oh my gosh, Kyle. I said on Bass Live, we're going to have to give out Century Club belts. And yes, 75 pounds after 3 days is on pace for the Century Club, but a lot can happen on the final day. So I said, if we break 80 pounds for 3 days, that's like a pseudo century to me, because 20 after catching 80, that's very easy to do.
Right.
In my opinion, compared to having to catch another 25 or something, there's a lot of things. So you would have 2 pseudo century belts from the opens.
I'm going to make one out of cardboard. Like when I was a kid, I used to pretend I was first. We did tag team on the trampoline, and I used to make these. We'd take old cardboard boxes and make belts out of them and then draw on them. So I'm going to make one. Actually, just hang it up here. So you just tell me I need to
bring them both to Hartwell. Bring them both to Hartwell. And if you catch 80 pounds at Hartwell, I'll get you a legit one made.
If I catch 80 pounds at Hartwell, I deserve one. That's a fact. That is a fact right there for sure. It's Hartwell's probably going to be back to normal, offshore stuff. But yeah, it's been magical, man. It's been fun. I'm fishing good. I started the season off. I mean, obviously not expecting to have anything like that happen. But I know this might sound silly to some people, but I made a switch to lose, and their slogan is "Feel the difference." And this isn't some sponsor plug. I mean, honestly, I feel the difference, and it's made a big deal for me. So with having the ability to have good fishing reels, and more importantly, a lot of options on rods. So, before I was using a different brand, and there was 3 or 4 rods that I pretty much made everything work with because we didn't have a wide range of rods, and the actions on some of the other ones I didn't really prefer. So I had to make everything work with like 3 or 4 rods. Now I can fine tune my actions, my length, my bends, my everything, like match it perfect. So I'm playing with a full set of clubs is the best way to describe it, for golf. And that makes a difference, man. I'm actually enjoying fishing from that aspect of things. And when you enjoy fishing from your equipment side, from your boat, all the things that I've got set up this year, I feel like I've got this the best I've ever been set up. And I felt that way before the season started. And I really think it's really translated into me landing more fish. Like, I don't want to speak bad things into my fish landing abilities, but I haven't lost any fish this year. Like, all those big ones that I caught at Okeechobee, all the big ones I caught at Santee, like, it's not even a thought in my mind. Like, I just hook them, I land them, and everything's great. And, that wasn't the case a few years ago. I had a lot of issues losing fish. I mean, I've lost a lot of fish the last 3 years that make up a huge difference in points and top tens and all kind of stuff.
Scott, you mentioned feel. Obviously, one thing that makes you feel good is starting the season off with a giant win and already qualifying for the Classic. Like, I think the mindset from some people is like, you can just basically take off the Elite Series season, but you're a competitor. Like, that's not how your mind works. So, like, explain to people, like, there obviously is an advantage to being able to fish free and things of that nature, but like, just talk about, obviously your mindset getting back on track with the elites as well.
I don't know if I feel any different than anybody else that's competing on the tour. When they get up in the mornings, I still have butterflies. I'm still like nervous as a tick, to be honest with you. I've been doing this 25 years. And I've been around people that are kind of at the end of their career, and I can tell they're just there. They're just there because it's better than being at home. I'm there to win. I'm there to win. I set goals for myself. I've not always accomplished every goal that I've set out, but you know, I, I shoot for those goals. I had goals on FLW, and I eventually achieved them. And I've set forth goals here, and I've got one down. The Open. I wanted to have an Open trophy, and that's one goal. So, I don't know when I win a blue trophy, but I'm going to keep fishing until I do. And every day I get up, every tournament I fish, it's that number one focus right there. I want to hoist that blue trophy over my head at least once in my career. And of course, the Bassmasters Classic, that goes without saying. But what winning this Open has done for me, I've got a lot going on, man, with the TV stuff and all the different things going on in my world. It's a lot to juggle, and that anxiety that I used to have, or I've had before, especially mid-season where you're getting up and you're showing up. We don't get information. I can't call buddies to find out what's going on. I got to show up to these lakes and find fish, and that's stressful. And we're dealing with weather conditions and all these things. And then, in the past, about a third through the season, we start counting points up, and you can't get away from looking at the standings and going, man, I got to have a good tournament this next tournament, or I'm going to be out of the Classic, or I'm not going to be able to make it back. And all that anxiety and worrying is not there this year. And so that allows me to truly focus on that competitive side of winning that tournament. And that is a blessing, dude. I mean, I literally get up every morning, and I thank God for that, because that is to me. And I can't speak for everybody else on tour. These other guys they might not have those feelings, but for me, 25 years of doing this, I still wake up like it's my first tournament, man. I'm nervous as a tick. I'm second guessing everything. I'm evaluating every decision I make, and I treat every tournament the same as I have from day one. So having that pressure, knowing that I don't have to count points, allows me to put that focus on having fun and focusing on winning a tournament. And I hope I can fish the rest of my life like I've fished mentally this part of the season, whether I have a Bassmaster qualification or my belt yet or not. I hope I can go forward. It's been a neat experience to feel that freedom.
Sure.
So Scott, we talked about you obviously won Okeechobee, third place at Santee Cooper, and we know that the first two elites you almost made the cut at Fork, which took ignoramus amount of weight to do. We were talking about the weights to get a check at Santee were like way higher than local Kyle Austin thought it would take, and if he would have caught what his predicted winning weight was, he would have finished fourth. So it was one of those things of like everything was higher. Can you speak to, obviously there's nothing anyone could have done at Okeechobee to do anything to beat you. Like that was your week, 21-pound victory. Like it was God's timing and everything was working out perfectly for you. But in terms of the way this season's gone, we've seen a lot of higher weights. We've seen a lot of records fall. And what are we attributing that to? Are we finally hitting some of these tournaments at good weather windows for Okeechobee, for Santee, for Toledo Fork? Or is it a little bit of technology? Because Kyle Austin didn't utilize it a ton. Where's that balance of like these lakes are hitting their stride again, and we're in the glory days of these lakes second coming, compared to what they maybe said years ago?
So technology obviously plays a factor in that, but that's not the deciding factor. The difference in these tournaments, Fork, Okeechobee, Santee, Toledo Bend, all of them, to be honest with you, bass is always, over the years, even before I fished bass, I used to be jealous. Like when I fished FLW, I was jealous all the time at how many times Bassmaster hit these lakes so perfect. And it was always the best week ever. Like it's just magical. And before I knew like who scheduled tournaments and before I knew anything about anything, I was on FLW. I used to sit back and I was jealous. I was like, they have got something figured out over there. Like it's
got the golden slipper.
FLW. We would go to these tournaments and it'd be like the worst week on the planet. And but I think so. So I think whoever's scheduling them, obviously that was really, really great timing. But let's face it, the weather for Okeechobee, we had a little cooler than normal, and it held those fish back just a little bit. And they broke loose day of the tournament. And that's exactly what happened at Fork. It's exactly what was starting to happen at Toledo Bend. And it's exactly what happened at Santee to the T. And so we hit 4 tournaments in a row on that warming trend, stable weather. Everything was held back, and it shows, And at Okeechobee, that's a big deal. And at Santee, it was huge. Like those fish. I mean, how do you plan? Like literally, the area that I fished one little pocket, and I had fish, new ones every single day moving in. The final day, every single fish I caught was completely new. I had no idea what I was going to catch. Day 2, everything was new, and I'm like, how do you plan that? I mean, that normally you're 2 or 3 days on either side of that, and it didn't work out. So we got really fortunate with those things. Now, technology obviously plays a huge part of that. People are starting to understand it better. More and more people have it, obviously, on their boats now, and everyone's becoming an expert with it, and so that's helping as well. So between technology and just some really fortunate good timing, that's why we saw those weights like that.
Can you talk a little bit? I don't want to disclose your secret sauce, but we've seen it 2 days on Bass Live now. The influx of technology. So there's 2 different trains of thought. Well, there's 97 trains of thought, but there are those anglers that are using forward-facing sonar. They're using Garmin Live Scope. They're using perspective mode. They're using Active Target, Mega Live, whatever brand. They're using that technology, and they're maybe out over the abyss, open water, seeking out fish, finding fish that are not holding on anything, and that's their game plan. Versus anglers who are fishing shallow or doing a traditional way of fishing, but utilizing it in that game plan. And I think that we have seen you utilize it within that game plan twice. Just because they're traditionally shallower bodies of water, you look like you're fishing, or you look like you're visibly sight fishing, or you're doing those things while you're meshing in technology. And so it's not like it is something that's you can replicate that. It's duplicate, I can duplicate that. So can you talk to that and speak to those 2 different trains of thought on styles of fishing with technology in both game plans, but one is attainable and one is hard to wrap your head around?
Yeah, I mean, look, perspective mode is something that I've started using a little bit more often. I use it heavily at Okeechobee to help me find some of the underwater cattail clumps and stuff that you could not see. Here at Santee, I used it to find some holes in the eelgrass. Um, a lot of people think that I'm sitting here looking at fish the whole time, and I have seen fish on perspective, but that's a bonus. Like when you see the fish on perspective, that's actually like, okay, wow, that's not always the case. And even at Santee, the spot that I had thicker grass in the area and had holes, and like old kind of like Okeechobee used to be. There'd be a sand hole, and I could see the sand hole with my eyes, but you couldn't see the fish in the hole real good because it wasn't shooting through the grass just right. But you could see the hole with your regular sonar, the regular mode. You could see the notch out a little bit better. But for me, with perspective, like at Fork, I was using it a little bit up shallow. I fish shallow, finding a lot of lay down trees and stuff. You can see where the ends of those trees come out. A lot of times, you could target some of that. So, you can mesh it really nice by looking that shallow, that 5, 6, 7, 10 foot of water. Picking up that cover and understanding kind of the layout of the land gives you a better idea of what's kind of going on and how to approach it. Different techniques, obviously, and different lures. So, um, it's a big deal, but it's not. I could have definitely done very well. I mean, there was some fish that I caught with perspective there that helped. It would have just taken a little longer without it. But a lot of the fish, like the first day, for example, every fish I caught the first day was up on the bank. They're literally in 2 foot of water, and sight fished the whole deal. And then kind of started milling around a little bit more, a little bit
Pressure
out.
and all that stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and some that were kind of out there, and that kind of developed. I didn't really even understand that. To be honest with you, the stuff offshore there at Santee where I caught them off the bank, I found some of those holes that day when I found that spot, and I marked a few fish that was out off the bank in those holes. I could really see them good. And then Kiriyama, what's his name?
Coda.
Coda, yes, Coda. I guess it's Coda. Right? Runs the Bass Cat. He runs the Bass Cat.
Yep.
Yeah. So Coda came in there on day one after like the first hour and a half, and he caught a few fish kind of out. Kind of like I'd found those other ones, and I started thinking like, okay, there's more fish out off this bank than I realized, and so that's when I started like moping around a little bit out there and kind of looking and finding it and marking. And I'd just mark the holes. I'd physically see the holes or go over them with my graph, and I'd mark them. And as I found every hole, again, those fish were coming in to spawn. Those holes would fill up with the bed every day. And even some of the fish that I caught both the fish off the bed. The next day there'd be a new male and a new female on the bed. So it was, definitely played a factor for sure. And utilizing that just gives you, I think that's why they call it perspective, is because it gives you a really great perspective of what's going on.
And I feel like it, the game, it's like the offshore traditional live scope, deal is high efficiency. You're not casting till you see one, you cast one, every cast is on a fish, but the traditional way of fishing on the bank is a quantity of casts, not necessarily quality of casts. You're covering
Yeah.
as water as many casts as you can make in a day. I made 2,000 casts, but it's highly inefficient. So
Yeah.
if perspective is helping you be more efficient on your shallow
Well,
casts.
like this. It's like I pull into like, for example, at Fork, I pull in a pocket and I look at the bank and I go, okay, there's some shoreline grass and there's a tree in the water. I can physically see the tree going into the lake. And then 20 yards down the bank, there's another tree physically going in the water. And as you look at it with your eyes, you say, okay, there's the tree. And you cast over by what you see and you bring your bait by it. But there is 20 more feet of tree out in the lake, that branches out and it's all spider webbed out there. And you can kind of assume that's what's going on, but until you see it on perspective, you're like, okay, there's a big main beam that runs way out in the lake, or there's two lay downs that are not visibly on the bank anymore that have fallen in the water completely that I can now target. So I'm not sitting there with the rod in my hand like looking for a fish. I'm casting and I'm treating that as my eyes to then run my crankbait or throw my jig or throw my bandito bug and run it down something as I'm fishing, just looking. I'm not looking for the fish. I'm looking for the cover.
Scott, one thing that has been really cool from my perspective, I got to see it in person there at Okeechobee and everything. The young guys that are fishing the opens that are having a lot of success, like a lot of those guys, you could just tell in person, like they look up to you, you know, in a way, like as a mentor in certain ways, and you know, have followed your career. What has it been like
Yeah.
for you getting to fish against like the Bo Brownings, the Laker Howes, like the guys that their dads you've competed against for years and years? Like, what has that experience been like on the Opens this year?
It's been really cool, honestly. It's a big honor for me to be recognized by them in that way. I think you're right. I feel a good feeling. I feel like they respect what I've done. A lot of them have grown up watching me over the years. It's so funny now when social media and YouTube and everything for so many years and TV that I literally have people come up to me. They're like 25 years old and they go, "Man, I've been watching you since I was 6 years old." And I'm like,
Oh my
"What?"
gosh.
You know, like you know, I'm very glad and fortunate that I was consistent with what we produced for all those years, because I think it's paying off big time with that next generation. I think they look to me as a good resource, um, you know, for not only just fishing but just how to maybe do business. And I feel like we've you know, when I eventually am not fishing anymore, whenever that day comes, you know, I want to be remembered for not the trophies. You know, my dad has 19 trophies, so I'm never going to beat him on the whole trophy thing. So
If you
it's
keep
just
fishing opens, you might.
well,
I'm just kidding.
but it's like you know, I don't. It's not the trophies that make me proud. Individual trophies, that means something to me. Obviously, that trophy does, and the Forest Wood Cup does for obvious reasons. But you know, when I have dads come up to me and moms come up to me, or these young kids come up to me, or young men come up to me, and they say they've watched me for all these years, and they're a reason why I'm the reason why that they started fishing, or their dad comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm spending so much good quality time now with my kids. We're doing fishing teams now, and that's all because of you." Um, that makes me happy. You know what I mean? That's to me, I'm more proud of that, and I hope that we've made a good positive mark in this industry, to help expand bass fishing into that next generation. And so again, it's awesome to be able to hang out with these guys, and I feel a ton of gratitude from them. You know, when I talk to them, and
Certainly.
it's awesome to see how good these fishermen are. And I'm a little like I'm a little I don't know jealous, but I'm a little like dang, because when I was 20 years old, like fishing tournaments, 19, 20 years old,
Like 10 years
like
ago.
things like I knew how to throw a spinner bait and throw a worm. Like I was like a worm fisherman, like old school. Like that was like my whole. That's all I knew. And it took me until I went on the road on these tournaments to self teach myself. You know, I asked Aaron Martins. I sat down with him one day and I said, "Dude, tell me about a drop shot." I didn't know anything about a drop shot. I was like, "How much line do I need? How much leader do I need? How much do from the hook to the weight?" Like, because I was all over the map, you know. And I remember spending time with Sam Lashley teaching me how to. Hang on one second. I gotta send that to voicemail. I got somebody calling. Um, you know, all the different people that I've learned from over the years, which was kind of like, and now these young men have watched videos for all these years, and they're coming out of the gate at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, like knowing everything. Like, honestly, like, so where they're going to be in the next 5 to 10 years with the maturity of making decisions is just crazy. Like, it's crazy. This sport's going to get very technical, very, you know, they're processing at that age. They process so much faster. They're like a brand new computer. You know, they're like the latest and greatest model of Apple computer that just came out with the M2 processor. That's what we're dealing with here. And you know, and so it takes us, the guys that have been around for a while, you know, our processors are
Some are still on dial up. No, I'm just kidding.
exactly.
Well, Scott, yeah, I figured I can imagine seeing Scott Martin do a Scott Martin challenge with an angler, and then now he's fished so long, he's doing it with an angler's son. You know, like you maybe have done it, and that'll be cool to see. Just like we see other athletes, it's like I still played in the majors when my son made it or something, whatever the case may be. So we got two questions left. I've got a question, and I'll let Kyle ask a question, and then we'll let you go. But normally everyone's got the goal of qualifying for the Bassmaster Classic and they know where it is. And so they're like, I got to make the Classic on so-and-so lake. I got to make the Classic for next year. It's on this lake. You made the Classic and didn't know where we were going. So when you heard that 2025 was going to be Fort Worth and it was going to be Ray Roberts and it's in late March, what was the first thing Scott Martin thought about late March, North Central Texas Bassmaster Classic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was at Fork when they announced it, so I was thinking like, this is good. I mean, this is like the lateral line of Lake Fork and that lake are about the same. So, I think it's going to be great. It's going to be right up my alley. I think we could hit it really well. The other thing that's always neat, there's always things in my mind that give me motivation, and so my motivation, other than winning it from my dad, is that I have family there in Fort Worth. So my aunt and cousins live there, and they're right down the street. So we're going to have a little some family energy there in the event, and so that'll be good. So it should be awesome. I mean, I think big bass, of course, in that lake, and depending on the weather trend, it could be a spawn deal or real close to a spawn deal. So I think it's going to fish a lot like Fork did this year, where it's a few fish are going to the bank shallow and there's some fish out on some trees, and it's going to be amazing. I need to go out there and do a little pre-scout and just to kind of understand the lay of the land and understand which side of the lake they like the best and all that kind of stuff. So I may go out there after the Classic and spend a few days, fly out.
My sub question is, will we see Scott Martin get a fitted cowboy hat? Because that was the tradition in 2021 when we went there. Like, I didn't have the funds to do it and I would never wear it enough. So I didn't get one, but 2023 or 2025, I mean, I might get one too. So is Scott going to get a fitted cowboy hat?
I have a good pair of boots. I have a very nice pair of boots. I don't have good jeans yet. That's the reason I don't wear my good boots. And I don't have a hat, but I will get one. I'll try to sport it for sure. Yeah, that'd be good. I got a little nice little like leather vest too that I can put on.
Right, tassels. You got to bring some tassels.
Yeah,
get some tassels out. Okay, Kyle.
Final question for me. Obviously, with the Classic being the topic of conversation here, obviously the fans, everybody getting super excited for the Classic this year at Grand. Obviously, giant bummer that you're came that close to fishing in the tournament, but just like your preview of the tournament, like what do you expect? Things that'll play. How do you foresee that tournament going on? Because obviously, like you have nothing to lose by saying exactly what you think's going to happen. Like, what do you predict in that tournament?
So yeah, the next week Classic. I mean, I just talked to Canterbury on the phone. I'm not going to say what he said just because I don't want to give out his his thought process. But he did say the lake's low, lower than it was when he went and pre-scouted. So that in my mind, that's going to take a lot of fish off the bank, out of the bushes. Weather-wise, I kept asking Canterbury and Airy, what's the weather looking like? So I think it's fairly stable. I don't think it's like a big cold front. I don't think it's a warming trend either. So my opinion would be, a really good pre-spawn deal. I doubt you'll have fish moving up on the banks, but you know what? It's been a kind of a strange year. We've seen some fish, like even at Fork, start spawning in the mid 50s. And so if that water temperature is at the right temp, the back of those creeks could have some spawning fish. So depending on clarity and all that kind of stuff. But I think, jerk baits are going to be a big deal, of course. I think, brush piles close to spawning areas, kind of like maybe taking a minnow or a wacky worm and targeting smaller piles where there might be 2 or 3 fish in there could be a big factor. I think you'll see some guys doing that. But you look back at Grand over the years, and you remember the stories of guys getting in the back of some of those creeks and really blast them. I think it was Edwin Evers that did a really fantastic job that one year. Somebody's going to catch them like that, of course. And then you're going to have, let's put a prediction. How many people do you think out of the top 10 are going to be in Wolf Creek the whole time? Like, I think there'll be 2. I think 2 people will make it out of Wolf Creek. The final day, you'll be filming them in Wolf Creek.
I thought, I didn't know that the water was necessarily low, but I had said that Wolf Creek, with it predominantly being shallow, yes, it's the first one that's going to freeze over when it's cold, but it's also one of the warmer ones as soon as it gets warm. It's got docks, it's flatter, that if there are fish wanting to spawn, I could see it. And if you think about all the winter tournaments at Grand that might go out of Wolf and get released there, they have a stable population of fish. So I like that last second throw in prediction there of Wolf Creek, because we've seen it. I mean, Edwin ran the bottom of the lake on day 1. He ran up the river day 2, and he ran elk on day 3. And so he ran 3 different areas to win his classic there most recently in 2016. So we could either see someone really spot hop to perfection or sit in an area the whole time. There's going to be someone that's saying, I had the fish to win the classic. And it makes me, before we let you go, I know I only said 2 questions. Did you, we said, could there be someone clean sweep an Opens division and win it? Because you were threatening on the final day of Santee. Was there a fish maybe that you were only 3 pounds off the win and you got third? Was there a fish on a day 2, a day 3 that maybe could have got you the win at Santee and you could have gone 2 for 2 this year?
Yeah, it was interesting. That again, I kept finding new fish, and that last day, of course, we had a short day. We had to be off the water at 1 o'clock, and so with the wind and the weather, that means I had to be packed up and busting bugs on the lake by 12:30 to make it back in time. And so I found a fish at about 11:30. I went over to a bed that I had found in practice, caught a fish off of it maybe the first day, and sure enough, there's a giant female there, maybe an 8+ pound fish, probably the biggest one, literally the biggest one that I had seen all week, along with a big male. And I caught the male. Wasn't sure which one bit first, of course, but the male bit. And I was going to throw the male back, but I was like, you know what? Let me just keep it because I don't have enough time right now to maybe catch another almost 4-pounder. So I kept it in the box and I worked that fish and worked it. And she got really interested and almost bit a few times. I was trying some crazy lures on her and stuff, trying to get her all mad. And I was this close to getting her to bite. And I had about 22 minutes left. And I thought, you know what? I need to leave this fish. I got one more fish that I think will gain maybe a pound, pound and a half, maybe 2 pounds at best. And because with a short day, you never know what's going to happen. So I ran to that fish, caught it. It only weighed 4.5 pounds. And it did give me more. I think it was at 25.13 or something. And it dropped me up to 27. So thinking like, somebody might have a bad day. I mean, a short day, weather, all the different things, which half the top 10 had a tough day. Half the top 10 didn't catch them at all. And you're looking back, Kyle. But look, here's the deal. Hang on one second. Mimi, I'm on the phone. I'm on a podcast. Okay. And so my mother-in-law is coming in my office.
1 minute, Mimi. He's almost done. Sorry.
Yeah. But here's a neat thing that I realized when I was there. I fished that tournament 100% to win. I fished it up until that last minute as hard as I could to win. When I stood on that stage and I got bumped to third, and I watched Laker Howell stand there knowing he got second and knowing that Kyle Austin won the tournament. And I looked out in the crowd, and Kyle Austin's family's there, his mom and dad and sisters and friends. And it hit me right then. Like I was so happy that I finished third. I know that might sound weird to people, but I'm actually was so happy and okay with it because, yeah, great. I win the tournament. I get an extra $35,000. But at the end of the day, dude, what's $35,000 going to do in my life 10, 15 years from now? Nothing. I mean, honestly, that's not what drives me. I would have taken a classic opportunity away from an angler, either Laker or Kyle. And I'm so happy that Kyle gets to go experience that for the first time, because that's going to change the trajectory of his career. Winning that money, winning that trophy, going to the Bassmaster Classic is going to do so much for his career and his sponsors and his family that it's going to forever change the path. And Laker having a great second place finish, 22 years old, that money's a big deal for him. That's his highest finish, I believe. It's good for his sponsors and his family legacy. I'm so glad those guys got first and second. And I'm so great with third because, again, I would have left there going, yeah, I just took a classic opportunity away from one of those two guys. And that I'm good with it. So I just want, it kind of hit me at that weigh-in. I was so thankful. So it was meant to be. It was meant to be for coming third.
It's pretty cool to be on the other side of it. If you didn't win, you get to watch a kid win in front of his family, just like you did the month prior, winning in front of your family. And you did get a third place trophy. And so it's been a good year for Scott Martin. Scott, I hate that we won't see you on the water in the Bassmaster Classic this year, but You were the first person to qualify for the 2025 Classic. So we'll definitely see you there. And we will see you at the Expo. We're excited for the Classic coming up. And congrats on your start. I know your dad's got the records. He's got all the accolades, and you would hope to get some of those. But him being the most ever angler of the year, that's a record that may never be broken. And Scott Martin's 3-day opens weight of 90 pounds is the record. You have, at least you at one time in history, you both have your name at the top of some Bassmaster record, which is very cool.
Great. That is awesome to think about. Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. Appreciate you making the time.
Thanks,
Scott Martin, Opens champ, Classic qualifier, Elite Series pro, and one of the hardest workers in the sport, Kyle.
Yeah, there's no question. Obviously, we had McCoy on just a few weeks ago, and that you can never take away from Scott Martin. Like, I've heard a lot of people that I respect, like, highly in the industry, that are like anybody that ever says a negative word on Scott Martin, like, doesn't understand how hard the dude works. Because, like, there's other people that work hard, but, like, it doesn't even compare, like, to his schedule and the things that he does. And you know, I want to go back to something I had asked him. You know, I didn't want to, like, keep hounding on it, but like I said, getting to see it in person, like getting to see some of these guys' eyes light up, like to see Scott Martin fishing those tournaments, and you know, get to talk to him, and you know, congratulate him on the win at Okeechobee and all the things that happened there. You know, I'm sure it was the same way at Santee. It is really cool, because you can tell that that's like a very neat opportunity to be fishing against Scott Martin on the final day of an Open. You know, obviously the goals are different. Like, Scott's goal is just to win those tournaments, and especially there at Okeechobee. But like, to be there and you know, say such nice things. Like, I got to hear some of the conversations and some of the things he was saying to these guys. Like, it was really cool. Like, as a fan of the sport, like, it made me feel really good to see those interactions, and you know, it's just really neat to you know, for Scott to be, you know, like I mentioned, like a mentor of sorts to some of those guys that were super happy to be fishing against him.
Yeah, people will carve out their identity and their reputation in the sport. Some of it's by on the water performance, some of it's by in person with the fans' performance. And I know, just like Swindle, just like Ike, there may be one or two bad interactions with fans because you can't take all day. Otherwise, you don't get to do your job. But taking the time for the fans, the meetups, I know people call Scott Hollywood, but I'll also call him Mr. Distraction. He, if there's ever a person that has balanced distractions well to have a good career, and to endeavor into things, he's tested himself. When the split happened and he no longer wanted to fish with FLW, he 100% could have gone home, done TV, and fished Okeechobee the rest of his life. But he has challenged himself in the Elite Series. He now has a Bassmaster trophy. He now has two Bassmaster trophies. Even though one's a third place, it's still a second trophy for a podium finish in the Open. So kudos to Scott. And he had high praise for Kyle there. And like we had talked about before we had him on, I had left off on my kind of recollection of Kyle's fantastic game plan, how hard it is to have a game plan and then for it to execute on day one of a tournament, but then how hard it is for that game plan to continue the next 2 days. You're riding on the doubt that it's going to go away, or what if it stays? How much can I milk this? If I catch 5 fish and one of them small, do I stay and upgrade, or do I get out of there and just have 5? And Kyle ran it to perfection those 3 days of competition. So I didn't get to hear your thoughts. What were your thoughts watching on live, hearing some conversations that Palmer, Tommy, and I were having, and Such, and then also what I was kind of revealing that Kyle had said on the phone previously?
Yeah, so a few things. One, I didn't hear much of what y'all said because I had you on mute, because I didn't want to listen to you guys. Didn't care.
Unreal.
No,
Thanks for the view.
Yeah, in all seriousness, there was a couple things I took away. It was like, you know, one, we talk about this a lot in springtime tournaments. It's a hard thing to explain to somebody, but it's a even harder thing to do. It's like, when you get to a springtime tournament, you know, you want to believe in your mind that, like, all the fish are doing one thing. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, but that's almost never the case. Like, not all the fish are spawning in the lake at the same time. Not all the fish are pre-spawn at the same time. Not all the fish are doing the same thing. That's never the case. And watching Kyle Austin, like, it was really impressive that he was able to, mix in different game plans, being able to do the pre-spawn like you see in the photo galleries and, see him on live catching fish on a red rattle trap, a red, lipless crankbait, but I don't know exactly.
Strike King 2-tap, baby.
Yeah, okay.
If you had us unmuted, you would have known.
Yeah, no, exactly. Or if I'd have paid closer attention to the top lures gallery, maybe. But being able to see him do that and then in the same day go flip, skip a wacky worm under a tree for a fish that, whether he's spawning or not, like a fish much closer to spawning than the fish he's catching on a trap, probably. Like that's hard to do. Whether it's your home lake, it's not like being able to mix those things in, because I feel like as an angler, a lot of times, like your mindset is like, find the one thing and like grind as hard as I can at that one thing. So being able to, switch it up and do different things in a tournament like that, it's way easier said than done. So that was one thing that I gathered. And then two, the thing that was really just wild watching the day was like, you kept seeing these big punches come in from Scott Martin, from Laker Hal, like they would catch a giant and you'd be like, man, like this might fall from his fingertips and he might not make this happen. But it was almost as if like he obviously had no clue any of that was going on, but it was almost as if like every time something like that would happen, he'd be like, I got something for you. Like I got something. And then he'd, like you said, go to that tree and catch a 7-pounder. He'd do that. I mean, it was just like the performance was insanely impressive, home lake or not. Like you said, there's plenty of ways that being on your home lake can be a, I don't know about a distraction, but it can be a disadvantage a lot of times.
If you caught them off of 900 trees, how do you know which
Sure.
6 ones are your old faithfuls?
100%. But like for him, watching him, navigate that final day, it was like every single bit of knowledge he had was being used to the perfect amount at the perfect time. Like you couldn't have scripted a better performance, that final day, especially, considering the bad weather and all the things that were thrown in. I mean, it's not like he just had a smooth sailing, like easy conditions. I mean, it didn't matter who you were fishing that tournament. Like the conditions were adverse on that last day, but to have a game plan and, like we talked about, just execute it perfectly, was just really, really impressive. And like you said, couldn't be happier for Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Guy who falls short of his ultimate goal of qualifying for the Elite Series. He said it on the stage multiple times. I love that I'm going to the Bassmaster Classic. Don't let me undersell how important that is to me. But my goal is to fish for a living. So I want to make the Bassmaster Elite Series. He obviously is fishing for a living now, guiding, fishing the Opens. Now that Classic, 50 grand goes real far for him. As an angler, you're set for the year and you can now fish differently. You can fish, and not that he's going to go for it in every event. That's not the way you do it in the Opens to qualify. You got to, obviously, you can be a little more risky though. When those little, not your overall game plan, but on a day, I gotta make this risk. Boom, I'm okay to do it. Also he's going to be at the Classic at Grand. He's going to be in some of the booths. It's an opportunity to capitalize in the industry, and you're a hot name that just came off a massive win. And that's probably, all wins are created equal. Opens wins are created equal. Elite wins are created equal to themselves. But man, the timing of winning one right before the Classic, and you can go there and you're kind of like, hey, here's our pros in our lithium battery booth or whatever it is. And here's our Opens pros too. It's like, hey, here's Kyle Austin. He just won an Open and his trophy's here. Or him because he just won an Open. It's like you kind of get pushed to the front of the line of like, up there with the echelon. So very cool for him.
Very similar to like when Jay Shakurat won the smallmouth event at St. Lawrence with the all-time record for smallmouth, and then like 3 days later goes to ICAST. It's like,
yes,
like
exactly.
Where's my money? Like, yeah. It's a very, very unique situation you can't plan for, but it really is like the timing is just like amazing.
Yes, absolutely, and good for them. And I'm glad that our Opens anglers are getting some love nationally, because that's the biggest thing that'll make that series grow, and the biggest thing that'll help that series thrive for anglers' bank accounts is, obviously we want the series to grow, but we already have 225 boats in most divisions. Like it's grown. It's to the level we want. We're not open to 250. We got the number we want. But now it's The payouts have increased. AOY money's there. Recognition comes with it. Contracts and deals with sponsors. And now those anglers now have a responsibility to uphold what traveling professional fishermen uphold, which is social media obligations, appearances, expos, all kinds of things like that. And there's no bigger appearance or expo or fishing tournament than the Bassmaster Classic. So, Kyle, in the next episode of the podcast, it's all classic. We're going to get a definitive water level readout. We're going to get a definitive water temperature before we do it. We will give all of those details in our classic preview, the weather outlook as well, fantasy picks and more in the next episode. But Kyle, it's good to talk about Kyle, not you, but Kyle Austin and Scott Martin, Laker Howe, a fabulous Santee Cooper event right at the back end of 2 fantastic elite events, and then right on the back end of some great opens as well. So that's episode 168 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. We will see you in the next one. It's the Bassmaster Classic. If you're not there, you're square.